Now, last night, Channel 4's Dispatches programme focused on the government's handling of the pandemic. One of the people featured in the documentary was Jane Davis, the head teacher of Lanchester EP Primary School in County Durham.
Tonight, Dispatches goes undercover in one of Britain's biggest COVID testing labs. The Prime Minister pledged the government's world-beating test and trace system would help stop a second wave. In Northumbria, primary school head teacher Jane Davis was one of those trying to cope with the shortcomings of the test and trace system.
It's been really challenging. I mean, after only 7 days back, we were almost on our knees. I had 5 staff who either were waiting for tests themselves or perhaps a family member had had symptoms. Some were off almost 5 days.
In September, she had to send 2 classes home just 5 days into the new term. The system was in serious trouble just when her school and others across the country needed it to work.
I think anybody with an ounce of common sense would realise that actually when you put hundreds of thousands of children back into a school environment in September at the end of summer, that's when the germs are more prevalent.
Well, I spoke to Jane a little earlier on and I asked how things are now, as it's been a stressful time for the school.
I think all schools have. It's a different way of living at the moment. You get up in the morning and I'll be honest, if it gets to 7:30 and I haven't had any phone calls from staff to say that they need to self-isolate or they're not well, then I think it's going to be a good day. Then you get to school and you get the voicemails and the emails from parents to say that their child needs to stay off because they've either got symptoms or they've got parents or siblings with symptoms. Every day is just a challenge, I'll be honest, at the moment. It's hard.
I bet it is. And you took part in a national documentary, so Channel 4's Dispatches came to the school. Why did you say yes to that, Jane?
At the time when they came in September, we were on our knees because at the time you couldn't get a test in the northeast. You were phoning and having to wait days before you could access a test. There were no home testing kits to be delivered. If you were lucky enough to have got a test, then it was taking 4 or 5 days to get results back. And at that time, I had a barrage of phone calls and emails from parents who were at their wits' end because they couldn't get access to tests for their children. I also had staff who were displaying symptoms, but they couldn't get a test for days. And so we went through a period of time, after being so positive and so excited about reopening, after just 10 days in school, I just thought, how on earth are we going to get through this year if it's going to be like this? So I did write to the MP about my dismay in the testing system, and I think, Channel 4 got in touch after that and just said they were looking at doing a documentary for Dispatches about the testing system, and could they come and film for the day? I felt quite passionate about it because I think as school leaders, you will do whatever you can to keep your school open, to keep your children safe. But actually, we just felt that we were battling the odds, and the odds were against us at that point.
Well, you'd spoken to us, you called, and I don't think I'd ever spoken to you and heard you in such a negative space, if you like, if I can say that, because you are very positive and very upbeat and very optimistic, and, it was quite a shock to talk to you with you in that kind of headspace, if you like.
Yes, and at that time, I suppose I just felt completely let down because the very system that was supposed to be sort of world class did fail us at the time. So that's why I agreed. I mean, obviously, I did get permission from the Chair of Governors and from the local authority as well.
There were those people at the time, and I suspect probably still now, who would say, oh, teachers, you're paid to teach, and the threats to walk, the demands for more support, it's not necessary, just get on with it. How do you react to that?
I do think teachers are a special breed. All we want is best for the children. Yes, there are some vocal teachers, but I think, the vast majority of teachers and leaders will fight tooth and nail for the best for our children and the best for our school community. And if that makes us unpopular, then that's tough. But at the end of the day, we've got a job to do. My job as head of the school, the number one priority is to keep our children safe. And in order to do that at the moment, it is an issue because of all the bubbles and having to keep the bubbles separate, then staffing levels are higher. I've got an increase of staffing in each of the year groups, and all it takes is for one of those members of staff to go down and you've got an issue. We are, I suppose, as a profession, we can be quite vocal, But it's just because we want the best for the children in our care. That's all.
Absolutely. And you're working so hard as well to provide that. So the show went out last night. What's your reaction been like? What's the reaction been like to the programme around the people who work in school and parents? Have you had any feedback?
Yes, I think quite shocked, I suppose, at what was uncovered. We had no idea until the weekend that sort of there was that kind of element to the show. It kind of explains it, why not just us, but obviously, care homes, the country in general, were facing so many problems and issues at the time. And it's quite shocking, I think, what they did uncover. Yeah, it just makes you concerned if that's what we're relying on to keep our country going at the moment in the middle of this pandemic, then it's going to be a very tough few months to come still.
Looking back at 2020, I guess, Jane, what damage do you think this year has done to your school, to the children at your school? Can you know that yet? Do you think that's something that we're not going to know for a while?
I think this will probably live with them for some years to come, and they will never forget kind of, the head teacher walking into the classroom saying they had to go home to self-isolate for 2 weeks. No child wants that. The children just want to be at school. They just want to be here learning with their friends. I always say it's more to do with their emotional well-being that I worry about than their academic achievement. We will catch up. The staff are working hard to make sure that when they're in the classroom and, if they have to learn from home, that they've got the best education possible. But for me, it's kind of making life as normal as possible for them. And I think when they're in school, we're almost in our whole little bubble in school where there's nothing happening in the world outside because, yes, it's different in schools, but it is fairly normal in that they're in the classroom, they're playing, they're with their friends, they're having the fun. And what we want to do this year is staff are working really hard to try and make Christmas as extra special for them because, they've had an awful year, the children. We don't know what's going to happen on the 2nd December. And I think it may be Christmas in school. It might be only sort of fun experiences they get because they can't go and do the usual visits and things that they would normally do with parents. So we're determined that we will make Christmas as extra special as possible for them this year.
Has this year changed how you feel about your job, Jane?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, I've been in headship now for 15 years, in the classroom for 30. I'd never, ever expected this to have happened this year. I think it just makes me ever more determined to do the best we can, really. I'm really fortunate to have an amazing staff. It's probably brought the community even closer together. And I suppose my determination is once things get back to normal, whatever that new normal is, I just want us to be better than ever.
Jane Davis there, the head teacher at Lanchester EP Primary School in County Durham, speaking to me earlier at BBC Radio Newcastle.
On BBC